some of the research we've been doing all year on the relationship between stress and executive function. Let's start out by giving you guys a couple of definitions. So first one being executive function. It is the control processes of our brains that helps us make decisions, regulate emotions, and prioritize goals. It's essential to our higher cognitive processing. And then stress, obviously something most college students know about. A perceived straining or exceeding of our adaptive capacity. So, some research suggests that stress could have a negative effect on executive function. So essentially, stress could affect how well we deal in situations in which we need to make decisions, we need to control our impulses, and we need to regulate our emotions. We were particularly interested in the portion of emotion regulation at the beginning of this year. So we did some, I guess I'll give you some definitions first, jump ahead. Emotion regulation can be defined as the ability to balance emotional response tendencies to environmental stimuli. It essentially helps us react in emotional situations, and it's pretty important in our day-to-day functioning. Okay, so we looked at some prior research, and we found a self-report measure, but we really wanted to find a cognitive task that could be a good measure of emotion regulation. So we found the attention control capacity for emotion, or the ACCE, pretty long name, and it allows you to switch between shape judgments and emotion judgments. Now this is important. This is important because it allows you to measure how quickly you can go from attending to a neutral stimulus to attending to an emotional stimulus. And so in that sense, it kind of gauges how good you are at switching on and off your emotional brain. So essentially, our participants would see pictures like this, and if you were going to make a shape judgment, you'd look at this lady's face and you'd say, what's on her forehead? Is it a circle, square, or triangle? And then they'd have to make that selection. If they're going to make an emotional judgment, they'd have to look at the face itself and say, is this person happy, angry, or neutral? Now, executive function's role in this task. So it's a stimulus that can lead to two different responses. So you have to be able to control the ability to inhibit one response and choose the other one. And this requires effort, as I'm going to demonstrate for you now. All right, y'all ready? This needs some participation. So, first we're going to try attending to emotion. If you think the face looks angry, I want you to raise your left hand. If you think the face looks happy, I want you to raise your right hand. You ready? You good? Okay. Good job. All right, so we're going to attend to emotion again. Angry left hand, happy right hand. Okay, good. Y'all doing so good. Now we're going to attend to the shape. If the shape is a triangle, raise your left hand. If it's a circle, raise your right hand. Ready? Good job. Okay, so we're going to attend to the shape one more time. Triangle, left hand, circle, right hand. All right. Now we're going to do some switching. Now we're going to do the whole point of this task. All right. So I'll just think to yourselves for a minute. And remember that angry is your left hand and triangle is your right hand. Triangle is your left hand. Excuse me, I'm confusing you. Happy is your right hand, and so is circle. All right, you ready? You good? All right. So, tend to emotion. Okay. Tend to shape. Tend to emotion. Okay. Slightly confused? That's good. That's your executive function. That's your executive function in action right there. So, there it is. Just kidding. Lied to you. A man named Johnson, Dan R. Johnson, in fact, came up with the ACCE in 2009. And before he gave his participants the ACCE, he gave them an unsolvable anagram task to quote-unquote frustrate them. He measured how long they persisted and how much frustration and anxiety they experienced during, because he theorized that their emotional regulation would somehow suppress their frustration. he saw a correlation between the anagram time and people's performance on the ACCE. So that led us, we thought that was pretty interesting, so that led us to our first study that we did this fall that asked the question, are self-reported anxious people worse regulators of emotion? So what we did, we had 94 participants that we ran in 1 week. They were C of I students. We gave them self-report measures of stress and emotion regulation, and then we also gave them the ACCE. So
here's what we found. We found a correlation between perceived stress and the ACCE, but we did not find a relationship between emotion regulation and ACCE, which is pretty interesting. As you can see on this graph, as perceived stress was elevated, so was the reaction time to make that switch between shape and emotion. So that led us to ask the question, does stress directly affect performance on the ACCE? So in order to study this, we needed to induce stress in a controlled environment and examine the effects on ACCE scores. We decided to use a manipulation called the Trier Social Stress Test, and that has been shown to manipulate cognitive function through stress. So here's how it is. You get a 10-minute prep period to prepare for a job interview in a prestigious position in your field. You're told that there's going to be 2 experimenters that are trained in body language recognition and voice frequency analysis. You'll also be recorded with a video, and you're recorded through a microphone so they can further analyze your voice later. You stressed out yet? Then you give a 5-minute job interview speech about yourself. We did this task over in Jewett with a bright spotlight right on the one participant. It was very intimidating. And then they were given 3 minutes of interview questions. You were given 45 seconds to answer each question. Questions such as, what was your greatest failure and what did you learn from it? 45 seconds, go. Brilliant. And then the last stressful task, which I thought was the most stressful, is 2 minutes of mental math. You're given the number 1022 and asked to count backwards by 13 until you get to 0. Also very stressful. This is kind of a view of what it looks like from the participant's point of view. There's our microphones and our lovely person in a lab coat right there. Happened to be my neighbor, it's fine. And you can kind of see the video part that we were using. So we did the Trier Social Stress Test, and we measured heart rate and blood pressure. We did this both after the Trier Stress Test and on a normal day, so that we could get a baseline measure. The stress appraisal measure, which kind of accounted for how stressed they felt by the actual task. They were also given perceived stress scale, which measures how stressed they felt in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that's chronic stress. And the ACCE.
So from our preliminary results, we can already tell that the Triers worked. It elevated the participants' heart rate, and they reported having more stress and definitely were very, very stressed out. However, we did not see any difference in the ACCE results. However, this could be due to the small sample size that we used. If we used more people, we could potentially see that there is an effect, if there is an effect at all. But due to the small sample size, we are not currently seeing any effect in what we have analyzed thus far. We do also notice that the ACCE does not appear to have a correlation with acute stress, just going through our preliminary results. But we do know that chronic stress is correlated to decreased emotional control, emotional regulation, and emotional switching, and the ACCE does help analyzing that. So for future studies, we do look towards looking at students who are naturally under chronic stress versus the students who are not under chronic stress. This would be ideal for at the beginning of the year, coming off of summer break where everyone's happy-go-lucky and completely stress-free, coming into school, all excited, and measure them then, and then measure them again when it's dead week, finals week, and they're running around with their heads cut off because they're afraid they're going to fail their final. So, looks like we're almost out of time, so thank you guys for being a wonderful audience. Do you guys have any questions or final comments?
Take these guys around.